What happened in Mendocino County in October of 2017 is not something that anybody could be prepared for.
And so we looked outside and there was nothing but red skies everywhere. And
the wind was blowing branches out of the trees completely sideways.
And we started hearing all the propane tanks exploding. And we had all of our cars ready, so we decided, okay, we're leaving. So.
And it sounded like a war zone with fire, except you weren't getting shot at.
And it was moving like an animal. The fire, the glow, it was coming towards me and to my left a little bit.
I had some canopies up, and the wind had already knocked one down. And so me and my grandson Bryce, we went and laid him down. And I figured we were going to lose power that night just because of the winds. So what I did is I plugged my phone in to at least have a good charge. But then I also got my flashlights ready because I knew we were going to lose power. That's what I did, just seeing what I've seen in the past. I've never seen winds like that in October. I see them in the winter time when you got a big storm coming in, but I'd never seen them like that before.
I was here at the market, and there's lots of fire trucks swarming around, a lot of activity. There had been a red flag warning that day, which for high winds, so they were preparing for the possibility of the fire.
We were initially dispatched to assist Potter Valley Fire Department, where they were fighting a similar fire to what we had. It's still under investigation, so we're not 100% clear if it was the same fire or there were several starts, but we had 2 engines staffed down here to assist our neighboring agency when we heard over the radio the possibility of a fire in Redwood Valley. So when I responded with one of the battalion chiefs that lives locally from CAL FIRE. He arrived maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes before I did, at the intersection of East, West, and Tomkai roads. And we had about 5 acres on fire with extreme wind conditions. They're estimating now wind gusts close to 80 miles an hour. And because of the geography in that area, the fire was actually moving in all directions at about an equal speed, which was faster than I've ever seen. So from there, the fire jumped West Road, jumped Tomkai, and was cresting the hill over on the east side of the valley by Road J. At that point, we quickly determined that rescue was our top priority, so we started going door to door, cutting locked gates to get into access and get people and animals out. We basically just opened up the gates and let horses free, told people to evacuate immediately. From there, and I don't have a good timeline, but shortly after, we contacted the first person who had, the first victim of the fire, who had pretty significant burns. So we started treating him, and that just went on for about the first 8 hours of the fire was rescue and treatment of patients. We worked very closely with the sheriff's department as well as the highway patrol and the ambulance companies to basically just to minimize the loss of life and injuries. About, and this is an estimate, probably about 5 o'clock in the morning, the wind started to die down, and that's when we were really able to start more traditional firefighting tactics. We started, really Road K was where we started to try to make a stand and cut in a fire break. From there we were still having some gusting winds, and we were run back a few times. Road L we moved to. And at that point, we were still fairly limited on resources because of the regional fires that were going on. We were getting some resources in, which allowed for us to make a pretty good stand, using some private dozers as well as some fire engines. And then once we got to Rancheria, that was really where we were able to start really making a good fire line, good fire break, and really start protecting structures. In addition to that, we were also going back into the burn area and putting out fires and protecting those structures that had been burned over that were still salvageable. That was pretty much the first, like I said, the first 12 hours of the incident. And then from there, it was just, trying to build line, trying to continue to protect people. A lot of people didn't evacuate. So we were going back and checking on those folks that hadn't left to make sure that they were safe and that they were okay.
I live up on Tom Kai, top of Scenic, and the whole property burned. Luckily we stayed and saved the houses with the bulldozer and the hoses, and everything else burned in about an hour. It was moving so fast.
We consider a fire front moving at about 3 miles an hour to be extremely dangerous. CAL FIRE has done some calculations, and they're actually looking at this fire moving upwards of 18 to 20 miles an hour, which doesn't sound very fast if you think about driving your car down the road, but nobody can outrun that. And on some of the roads in our valley, you can't even drive fast enough to get away from something like that. So it was hours of sheer terror. I've described it to people as that feeling you get when you're in a near-miss traffic accident and you have the adrenaline rush, you have the fight or flight syndrome kick in. So your heart starts to race, your respiratory rate increases, your eyes dilate. That usually lasts 30 seconds. For us, it was going for the first several days of the fire. We were in that fight or flight mode.
I was here in the house. They call this the big house. And my son Matthew really saved the house. I stayed here with a couple of my children because it seemed safe. And it was just careful observation. Part of the winery burned.
The winery's pretty trashed. Parts of it, the old wooden office building burned. But then our crush pad was pretty good. It was, a heck of a mess, so we cleaned it up. And now we have a mobile bottling line doing some bottling here.
And just one quick last question to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
How do you feel about the people that did stay behind?
I understand why people would want to stay behind. This particular fire, I would say that folks are extremely lucky. The folks that stayed behind and weren't injured or worse. We don't take evacuations lightly. If we put out a mandatory evacuation, it's truly because of a life safety hazard. And I believe the sheriff feels the same way about that. So, like I said, I can understand from a personal level why people would want to do that, but from a safety level or a safety standpoint, I'm just glad more people weren't injured or killed in this fire. I don't know if that answers the question, but like I said, I understand why people would do it, but in this particular case, this was like nothing I've ever seen. It was an extraordinary event, so I'm just glad that those folks made it out.
And you don't know what you're going to do in a situation like that until you're put into service to do that. And our deputy sheriffs did things that they've never trained for. They just did it because it was the right thing to do. And as sheriff, you really can't get any more prouder than that.